Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Smotrich says minimal aid will help Israel destroy Gaza. So Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said on Monday that allowing minimal aid into Gaza will ensure Israel has continued support from its friends to continue with its goal of destroying the Palestinian territory. Smotrich's comments came after more than 70 days of Israel's total blockade on Gaza, and a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would allow a basic amount of food to enter the territory. 5 aid trucks reportedly entered Gaza on Monday. 5, which is just nothing, not even close to the amount needed, to the hundreds needed to bring real relief to the starving civilian population. Smotrich said allowing a minuscule amount of aid to enter Gaza. Listen closely to what Smotrich is saying here. He's saying that letting a very small amount of aid to enter Gaza will, quote, allow for our friends in the world to continue to provide us with an international umbrella of protection against the Security Council and the Hague Tribunal, and for us to continue to fight, God willing, until victory, end quote. So essentially saying, we got to let in a small amount of aid just for PR purposes so the U.S. will keep supporting us and achieve our goal of what Smotrich is openly pushing for is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And Netanyahu made similar comments on Monday, saying that allowing minimal aid into Gaza was about maintaining support from the U.S. He said, quote, our best friends in the world, senators I know as strong supporters of Israel, have warned that they cannot support us if images of mass starvation emerge. We must avoid famine, both for practical reasons and diplomatic ones. Without international backing, we won't be able to complete the mission of victory, end quote. So he's not saying they should avoid famine in Gaza because it would be wrong to starve all these civilians to death. He's saying we have to avoid it because to maintain support from the U.S. And what does he say there? Without international backing, and he's talking about the United States, because most of the world has turned on Israel and they receive the bulk of their weapons and military support from the U.S. He says, without that support, we won't be able to complete the mission of victory. So this is why, I get people say all the time, oh, why do you put all this focus on Israel? Why are you always talking about Israel and what's happening in Gaza? Well, this is why, the main reason why is because without support from my government, these atrocities would not be able to go on. So so Smotrich said that in the coming days, a small amount of supplies will be delivered to the bakeries. He said, quote, the bakeries that distribute pitas to people and public kitchens that provide a daily ration of cooked food. Civilians in Gaza will receive a pita and a plate of food, and that is it, end quote. And just so you remember who we're dealing with here, Smotrich is like the most extreme member of the Israeli government. Last year, he actually said that it may be moral and justified for Israel to starve 2 million Palestinians to death, but the world won't let us do it, is essentially what he said. He's saying, I think it would be right to starve all these people to death, but realistically, we're not going to be able to maintain support from the U.S. if we do it. So that's what this, allowing this very small amount of aid into Gaza is about. It's about ensuring that they can continue their goal of genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And Smotrich praised the Israeli military's new offensive, dubbed Gideon's Chariots, saying that the IDF was now destroying what is left of Gaza. He said once the civilian population is forced to move to southern Gaza, they will be expelled as part of President Trump's plan. Those were his words. He called it President Trump's plan to expel all the Palestinians from Gaza. And he has been one of the leading proponents of the ethnic cleansing of Gaza within the Israeli government. And Netanyahu said that Israel was engaged in intense, large-scale combat in Gaza to take control of the entire territory. And this is clear. We know this. The purpose of this escalated assault that Israel launched in recent days is full military occupation. And so they're saying allowing this aid in is going to let it happen. And this really points to something I think I mentioned yesterday. I was worried that essentially this was, they're going to let like a symbolic amount of aid into Gaza in exchange for continued U.S. support for the offensive and continued, U.S. bombs and everything. So again, 5 trucks entered on Monday, just a drop in the bucket of what is needed to bring real relief. And you still have, as we'll get into in the next story, the military operations have really ramped up. So the humanitarian situation is just getting worse. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes in Gaza kill 125 over 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said on Monday that at least 125 Palestinians were killed and 364 were wounded over the previous 24-hour period as the Israeli military expanded military operations in the Strip. The health ministry said that the bodies of 11 Palestinians who were killed in previous Israeli attacks were also recovered. Heavy Israeli strikes hit the southern city of Khan Yunis after the Israeli military ordered the evacuation of the area, threatening an unprecedented attack was coming. You see the picture here is of Palestinians fleeing Khan Yunis. And the IDF's Arabic spokesman wrote on X, quote, "The Israeli Defense Forces will launch an unprecedented attack to destroy the capabilities of terrorist organizations in this area. From this moment, Khan Yunis Governorate will be considered a dangerous combat zone," end quote. So medical sources told Al Jazeera that the Israeli military launched at least 30 strikes on Khan Yunis on Monday, and attacks also hit central and northern parts of Gaza. So, I haven't put in details about specific attacks, specific bombings. I was kind of overwhelmed just by, there's just so much happening in Gaza, but I'm going to try to hone in on kind of specific attacks and things as the week goes on. But this is, more than 100 Palestinians have been killed on a daily basis over the past few days. I think since last Wednesday or Thursday when Trump was over in the Middle East was when things really ramped up. And then on Friday they announced the beginning of Gideon's chariots, and it's just been a total bloodbath. And as I said, the humanitarian crisis is just getting worse, and it just goes on. The next one here, U.S. official denies threat to abandon Israel over Gaza. So a U.S. official speaking to the Times of Israel has denied a report that Trump administration officials have threatened to abandon Israel if it refuses to end its assault on the Gaza Strip. So the official was responding to a report from the Washington Post that cited a person familiar with discussions between the U.S. and Israel. This source told the Post, quote, "Trump's people are letting Israel know we will abandon you if you do not end this war," end quote. So the U.S. official speaking to the Times said that there may be disagreements, but the idea that the U.S. would abandon Israel is preposterous. So that Washington Post, it sounds nice that the U.S. is threatening to abandon Israel. I wish that was the case. But again, we're not seeing, in all these reports of the U.S. being frustrated, Trump being frustrated with Netanyahu, the U.S. wanting to put pressure on Israel for a ceasefire deal, haven't seen any indication, none of them have said that the U.S. is threatening to leverage military aid or cut off, the weapon shipments. There was also a report from Axios on Monday that said Vice President J.D. Vance canceled a planned trip to Israel because he did not want to suggest that the Trump administration endorsed Israel's decision to massively escalate in Gaza. Vance denied the report, insisting that his trip was canceled for logistical reasons. So, even if that is the case, that he didn't want to show public support for the escalation in Gaza, the U.S. is, to the world knows it, that the U.S. is still supporting this. You see the comments from all the world leaders who are condemning this, saying the U.S., Trump is the one with the power to stop this. Only the U.S. has the ability to stop this. And it's, in a very non-interventionist way that Trump could end this. He could just say, I'm not going to be involved anymore and cut off the military aid. Of course, he would face, I was talking about this with Kyle Anzalone today. I did his show, the Kyle Anzalone show. And, he brought up the fact that if Trump really tried to cut off Israel, it would face huge opposition from Congress. But anyway, I do believe he could pause weapon shipments, and that would be enough, I think, to end this. So anyway, unfortunately, we're just not seeing any indication, again, that the U.S. is willing to really put that pressure on Israel. We have seen the U.S. take a lot of steps in the region that Israel does not seem to be happy about, including the ceasefire in Yemen, the what else? Even the deal that got Edon Alexander out, the last Israeli captive in Gaza that had U.S. citizenship. I don't think Israel was happy about that engagement with Hamas, and also the talks with Iran, but those don't really seem to be going in the best direction. But so anyway, there are signs that the U.S. has taken a different course, in certain areas in the Middle East. But when it comes to Gaza, we just haven't seen that they're willing to use the leverage that will be necessary to get Israel to agree to a permanent ceasefire. All right, so the next one here, the UK, France, and Canada say that the situation in Gaza is intolerable and threaten to sanction Israel. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So I thought this was notable because these are pretty strong U.S. allies, although I guess Trump's been threatening to annex Canada or something here. But anyway, 3 major Western governments issued a statement condemning the Israeli-created starvation in Gaza and the settlement expansion in the West Bank. The UK, France, and Canada said they are considering sanctions on Israel in response to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. The joint statement from London, Paris, and Ottawa said, quote, "We strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable. We call on the Israeli government to stop its military operations in Gaza and immediately allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza," end quote. They said that the Israeli plan, the movement that has happened on aid in the past couple of days, they say is wholly inadequate. The statement said, quote, "Yesterday's announcement that Israel will allow a basic quantity of food into Gaza is wholly inadequate. This must include engaging with the UN to ensure a return to delivery of aid in line with humanitarian principles," end quote. And they're also threatening targeted sanctions over the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. The statement said, quote, "We will not stand by while the Netanyahu government pursues these egregious actions. If Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lift its restrictions on humanitarian aid, we will take further concrete actions in response. We will not hesitate to take further action, including targeted sanctions," end quote. So again, I thought significant coming from 3 U.S. allies. Pretty strong statement. All right, so the next one here, Trump says Ukraine ceasefire talks will start immediately. So President Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday and said that the call went well and that Russia and Ukraine would immediately begin negotiations on a ceasefire. He wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Just completed my 2-hour call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. I believe it went very well. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war," end quote. So Putin told reporters after the call that Moscow was ready to work with Ukraine on a memorandum on a potential future peace treaty. So he called it a memorandum on a potential future peace treaty. So I guess some conditions, what a future deal would look like. He said that it could, quote, "outline a number of positions such as settlement principles, the time frame for signing a potential peace agreement, and so on, including a potential ceasefire for a certain period," end quote. Trump said that he also spoke with Zelensky, and Zelensky said that Ukraine was, open to engaging on this memorandum idea. So Trump said he spoke with Zelensky and several European leaders afterwards. What was interesting is that he noted that Pope Leo XIV has offered the Vatican as a potential venue for the talks. So maybe these talks will happen there. Leo also met with J.D. Vance and Rubio while they were in at the Vatican for the inaugural mass. And he also met with Zelensky, and that's kind of been his message is, negotiations, and the Vatican could host, so maybe they will happen there. But it is kind of odd, it's just that this call happened a few days after Russia and Ukraine just held their talks in Istanbul, which didn't seem to make any progress toward a ceasefire, but there was the prisoner swap. But it seemed like, I thought the idea was that they would continue there. But so we'll see if this turns into more negotiations. It seems like it's kind of a last, based on the comments from other Trump officials, they're making it sound like this is kind of the last attempt at settling this war. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, they're still very far apart, the Russian and Ukrainian sides. Zelensky said again, after these calls that, Ukraine's never going to give up its territory. And, the reality is he's going to have to concede territory if he wants a peace deal. So we'll see if this new kind of renewed effort, I guess, makes any real progress. All right, so the next one here, massive U.S. spy drone returns to Black Sea patrols. This article is from the Defense Blog, which I believe is a Ukrainian website. But anyway, it's interesting. The U.S. Air Force has resumed high-altitude drone reconnaissance flights over the Black Sea. On May 17th, a massive Northrop Grumman RQ-4B Global Hawk was spotted conducting surveillance operations along the Romanian coastline, and these are very big drones, as you can see here from this picture. The unmanned aerial vehicle departed from NATO's Sigonella Air Force Base in Sicily, a key launch point for aerial intelligence missions across the region. I know I pronounced the name of that base wrong. I apologize to any Italian listeners. The RQ-4B Global Hawk is a strategic intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform. It can remain airborne for over 30 hours and is equipped with advanced sensors capable of identifying ground targets with precision. So you can see the map here. The red line is this drone. So it left Sicily and went over the Black Sea. So what's interesting about this is that the U.S. for many years, leading up to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, was becoming more and more active in the Black Sea. Lots of surveillance flights. There was one incident when Biden was president that there was like it wasn't clear exactly what happened, but a U.S. I believe it was an MQ-9 Reaper drone crashed in the Black Sea after an encounter with a Russian plane. But this is according to this site which tracks this stuff. This comes after a hiatus in U.S. drone activity over the Black Sea that began after Trump returned to office. Between 2022 and 2024, such flights were routine, but recent activity had been largely carried out by British and French assets. So apparently these drone flights stopped when Trump came in, and now we see they could be restarting. All right, so the next one here, the Houthis announced blockade on Israel's Haifa port. So Yemen's Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, announced on Monday that they are imposing a blockade on Israel's Haifa port, signaling Yemeni attacks on Israel will expand. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree said the blockade was a response to Israel escalating its genocidal war on Gaza. He said, quote, "The Yemeni armed forces, relying on God and trusting in God, have decided with God's help to implement the leadership's directives to begin working to enforce a naval blockade of the port of Haifa. Accordingly, all companies with ships present in or heading to this port are hereby notified as of the time of this announcement. The port has been included in the target bank," end quote. So since President Trump announced a U.S. Houthi ceasefire on May 6th, Ansar Allah has continued its missile and drone attacks on Israel, which have focused on the Ben Gurion airport. Israel has launched several rounds of airstrikes on Yemen, but the Houthis have shown no sign of backing down, and they have maintained that the Yemeni attacks on Israel will continue until there's a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the Israeli blockade of the Palestinian territory. Saree said, quote, "All measures and decisions of the armed forces related to the Israeli enemy, including support operations and the ban on air and sea navigation, will cease once the aggression on Gaza ends and the blockade is lifted," end quote. While President Trump framed the truce with the Houthis as a U.S. victory, the U.S. really, essentially, in reality, they gave up on trying to get trying to stop the Yemeni attacks on Israel. So they have continued, and again, this is a sign that they could escalate. All right, so the next one here, Israeli drone strike kills 1 and wounds 2 in southern Lebanon. This one is from Jason Ditz. So Israel's campaign of attacks against southern Lebanon continued on Monday, with drone strikes hitting multiple locations and killing 1 person while wounding at least 2 others. The deadly strike took place against the border village of Hula, killing a man standing in front of his home. The IDF issued a statement claiming that the person was a member of Hezbollah's elite Radwan Force. The Radwan Force is Hezbollah's special forces unit. And, with these strikes, Israel, is basically always claiming that they're Hezbollah operatives. We haven't, once in a while you'll see confirmation from Hezbollah, but we haven't seen, it's just Israel's word and Israel's claims here. And there's very little attention on the hostilities here in southern Lebanon. The Israeli continued occupation and the airstrikes. All right, so the next one here, Trump's Golden Dome to cost $500 billion. So President Trump's plan to develop a new massive missile defense system for the U.S., dubbed the Golden Dome or the Iron Dome for America, is expected to cost $500 billion over the next 20 years. This was reported by CNN on Monday. They cited an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office. So the project will be a boondoggle for U.S. weapons makers, and according to a report from Reuters, Elon Musk's SpaceX has emerged as a frontrunner to develop key parts of the missile shield. The report said SpaceX has partnered with Palantir and Anduril on the project. The CNN report said that representatives from SpaceX, Palantir, and Anduril have all pitched Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on their plans for the project, and a source told the media outlet that he wants what they are selling. The picture here is when Elon Musk attending a White House cabinet meeting last month. He looks very happy. Maybe he knew that this Iron Dome deal was in the works. Pentagon officials have submitted plans to Trump for several options for developing the missile shield, and Trump is expected to announce his plan soon. A spokesman for the Pentagon said, quote, "The Secretary of Defense and other department leaders have engaged with the president to present options and look forward to announcing the path forward in the coming days," end quote. The idea of the Golden Dome is to provide a missile shield for the entire territory of the United States that can intercept the most advanced missiles in the world. Trump's executive order that directed the Pentagon to pursue the plan specified that it must include space-based interceptors, and the White House's $1.01 trillion military budget request for 2026 includes $25 billion for the Golden Dome. And besides the massive cost, and I mean the feasibility of this is something, that like creating an Iron Dome over the entire United States that can defend against ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles is just a total pipe dream. Trump's comparing it to Israel's Iron Dome, but Israel's a very small country, and that dome is created to intercept short-range, crude rockets. So again, this is just going to be a total boondoggle for these companies that are getting involved, and it's also going to likely kick off a new arms race. Russia has already said, I linked to the story here, a Russian official, essentially in response to Trump signing the executive order directing the Pentagon to pursue this project, says that Russia could lift restrictions on its nuclear weapons in response to this, because if the U.S. builds this super advanced missile defense shield, then Russia is going to develop missiles to try to penetrate, new missiles to penetrate it, and it's just just create an arms race. So it's just a bad idea and not good all around, but it seems like something Trump is really set on. All right, so the next one here, 5 killed in East Syria car bomb, ISIS suspected. This one is from Jason Ditz. So attention is focusing on Al Mayadeen district in Syria's Deir Azor province. This is eastern Syria. There was a suicide car bombing on Monday. against a local police station, killing at least 5 people and wounding a number of others. Syrian state media reported that 3 security officers were killed and several wounded in the car bombing. There has been no claim of credit yet, but ISIS is believed to be the culprit. As one official noted, it's no secret that ISIS has cells in Al Mayadeen. So the General Security Forces launched a large-scale campaign in and around Al Mayadeen city, and they reported that 12 ISIS suspects, along with 2 Iranian militants, were captured so far in the operation. So again, this is the Syrian government, the HTS-led government, conducting raids against ISIS, which they just started, going after them the other day, and then we see this suicide bombing. So there's a potential connection there. But though there have been similar attacks in this part of eastern Syria before. But anyway, this is, I believe, as Jason mentions and everything, the ideology between HTS and ISIS is not very different. But you have the U.S. kind of making certain demands of Syria for sanctions relief, and I believe cracking down on ISIS is one of them, along with cracking down on the Palestinian resistance groups and normalizing with Israel. There's a few other demands as well. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. We have one from Ron Paul: cutting military spending would make for a big and beautiful bill. One from Rick Sterling: the human cost of Syria sanctions. One from Jonathan Cook: Jeremy Bowen's interview with Gaza aid chief was shameful, and he knows it. One from Trita Parsi: Witkoff's zero enrichment red line has zero chance of working. And one from Moran Rapaport: Israel's mission of total urban destruction. So please go check all of that out. And we got some stuff in the blog as well, and on the lower part of the page, so much stuff going on. So if you want to support the show, you could always just like and subscribe and comment, share with your friends, follow us on social media, read antiwar.com. Again, visit the page, click around, give us some traffic that way. Anyway, that is it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.